In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where ancient empires stretch across star systems and technology has evolved beyond imagination, one truth remains constant. Family bonds transcend species, politics, and even death itself. When the most powerful being in known space, a creature capable of destroying entire fleets with a thought, seeks refuge with the galaxy's most underestimated species, the universe is about to learn why humans have survived against impossible odds. What happens when a dragon princess, heir to an empire that spans 3 galaxies, crashes on a backwater human colony with tears in her eyes and blood on her scales? What happens when she whispers those words that have toppled kingdoms and ignited wars? They hurt my mother? The Drakmori Empire is about to discover why humans are the only species in the galaxy that bonds with apex predators as pets, why they're the only ones crazy enough to charge into battle singing, and why every other civilization has learned to fear the moment a human says, "I'm going to help you." This is the story of Zirathan Vexehai, Crown Princess of the Drakmori, and Marcus Chen, a maintenance engineer who was just trying to fix a water recycler when his life became infinitely more complicated. This is the story of how the galaxy's greatest empire fell, and how humanity rose from the ashes to become something far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Some bonds are forged in fire, others are forged in the space between stars when 2 unlikely allies decide that sometimes the only way to save everything you love is to burn everything else to the ground. Marcus Chen was elbow-deep in a malfunctioning water recycler when the sky caught fire. The maintenance bay of Colony Station Kepler 442b hummed with the usual sounds of failing infrastructure and Marcus's increasingly creative curse words, but the sudden roar that shook the entire station made him drop his plasma wrench. What the hell? He wiped grease from his hands and stepped outside, squinting up at the orange-tinted sky. Something massive streaked overhead, trailing smoke and what looked like liquid starlight. Whatever it was coming down fast and hard. Marcus had been on Kepler's 442b for 3 years, ever since the divorce papers came through and he decided that fixing broken things on the edge of human space was preferable to trying to fix his broken marriage back on Earth. The colony was small, maybe 800 souls scratching out a living mining rare earth elements and pretending the isolation didn't slowly drive them insane. They saw maybe 1 ship a month, usually supply runs or the occasional patrol vessel checking that they hadn't been eaten by space pirates. This wasn't a ship. The object crashed about 2 kilometers from the main settlement, sending up a pillar of smoke that could be seen from orbit. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and climbed into his rover, partly because Colony Regulation 15.7 required all maintenance personnel to investigate potential crash sites, but mostly because he was curious and profoundly bored. The crash site was a crater about 50 meters wide, the edges still glowing with residual heat. At the center lay something that made Marcus question his sanity. It looked like a ship, but organic, all flowing curves and what appeared to be scales instead of metal plating. Steam rose from its surface in patterns that reminded him of breathing. Kepler Bays. This is Chen. I'm at the crash site. You're not going to believe this, but I think this thing is alive. Static answered him. He checked his comm unit full signal strength, but something was interfering with the transmission. The air around the crater shimmered with an energy that made his teeth ache. As Marcus approached the craft, a section of what he'd assumed was hull plating suddenly irised open with a wet, organic sound. Steam billowed out, carrying scents of ozone, cinnamon, and something else. Something that triggered every prey instinct evolution had given him. A figure stumbled out of the opening, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. She was humanoid, but definitely not human. Tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that seemed to shift between pale silver and deep blue depending on the angle of the light. Her hair was white as starlight and moved as if underwater, defying the planet's modest gravity. But it was her eyes that made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. They glowed with an inner fire, literally glowed, shifting from gold to amber to deep crimson. And she was hurt. Dark blood, too dark, almost purple, seeped from wounds along her arms and torso. Her breathing was labored, and when she looked at him, those incredible eyes were filled with something Marcus recognized despite the alien features. Desperation. "Please," she said, and her voice was like music played on instruments he'd never heard. "I need sanctuary." They hurt my mother. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. He'd heard that tone before, in his own voice, standing in a hospital corridor at age 12. Some pain translated across every species barrier. Jesus Christ, okay. Marcus dropped his tools and moved toward her, medical training from his Navy days kicking in. You're injured. We need to get you to the medical bay. She flinched when he reached for her, and suddenly the air temperature around them spiked about 20 degrees. The grass under her feet began to smoke. I'm not going to hurt you, Marcus said carefully, recognizing the signs of someone running on adrenaline and trauma. My name is Marcus. I'm going to help you, but I need to know if you have any medical conditions, allergies, anything that might... She collapsed. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground and immediately regretted it. She was burning hot. Not fevering, but actually radiating heat like a space heater. Worse, the moment his skin touched hers, something electric shot up his arms. Not painful exactly, but like touching a live wire that carried information instead of electricity. For just an instant he saw flashes of images that weren't his own. Vast halls carved from what looked like crystallized starlight, beings that moved like living shadows, and something massive and terrible breathing fire across the void between stars. He saw ships, thousands of them, sleek and deadly, converging on a world that burned with its own inner light. And he saw her, this woman in his arms, screaming as something beautiful and ancient fell from the sky in pieces. The vision lasted maybe 2 seconds. When it ended, Marcus was on his knees in the smoking grass, the alien woman unconscious in his arms, and his comm unit finally crackling to life. What's your status? We're reading massive energy signatures from your location. Marcus looked down at the woman. Her breathing had steadied, but her skin was still fever hot, and those strange injuries didn't look like anything that belonged on a medical chart. 3 years of colonial life had taught him that sometimes the regulations weren't worth the paper they were printed on. Base, this is Chen. False alarm, meteorite impact, nothing more. Minimal damage, no immediate threat to the colony. Copy that, Chen. Return to base for debrief. Marcus clicked off the comm and looked down at the unconscious alien. Well, sweetheart, looks like you just became my problem. Getting her to his workshop without being seen required more luck than skill. The rover's cargo bay was just big enough, and most of the colony was either underground in the mines or inside avoiding the afternoon heat. Marcus lived in a converted storage facility at the edge of the settlement, partly because the rent was cheap, partly because his neighbors were 300 meters away and minded their own business. The workshop took up most of the space, a cluttered maze of salvaged electronics, half-finished projects, and tools that had seen better decades. Marcus cleared off his workbench and carefully lifted the alien woman onto it. In better lighting, her injuries looked worse. The wounds were precise, geometric, like she'd been cut by something that followed mathematical principles rather than physics. What the hell happened to you? He murmured, breaking out his medical kit. Colonial medicine was mostly about stopping bleeding and preventing infection until the monthly supply ship brought anything more sophisticated. He'd cleaned maybe half the wounds when she woke up. Her eyes snapped open, blazing like twin suns, and the temperature in the workshop jumped 15 degrees. Marcus found himself pinned to the wall by an invisible force, his feet 6 inches off the ground. Where am I? The musical quality of her voice was gone, replaced by something that made the metal walls vibrate. What have you done? Easy, Marcus gasped, fighting against whatever was holding him. You're safe. You're in my workshop. I'm trying to help you. Those burning eyes studied him for a long moment. The pressure holding him lessened but didn't disappear entirely. You are human. It wasn't a question. Last time I checked. Look, you crashed outside our colony. You were hurt. I brought you here because you asked for sanctuary, remember? You said someone hurt your mother. The force holding him vanished, and Marcus dropped to his feet, rubbing his throat. The alien woman sat up on the workbench, ignoring the fresh blood seeping from her wounds. You did not report me to your authorities. Seemed like you didn't want to be found. Call it a hunch. Marcus stayed where he was, hands visible. Want to tell me what happened? Who hurt you? She was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and filled with a rage that made the air itself feel dangerous. My name is Zyrathan Vexhai, Crown Princess of the Drakmori Empire and heir to the Starfire throne. 3 cycles ago, a faction within my father's court moved against my mother, the Empress. They claimed she had grown too soft, too willing to negotiate with lesser species rather than simply conquering them. Lesser species. Marcus filed that away for later consideration. The conspirators struck during the Festival of the Burning Sky when the royal guard was dispersed across the capital world. They overwhelmed my mother's personal guard and they... Her hands clenched into fists, and Marcus's tools began to glow cherry red from the heat radiating off her. Take your time, Marcus said gently. They tore out her heartfire. The words came out in a whisper that somehow filled the entire workshop. The core of her being, the source of her power. They left her alive, but diminished. Broken, a shell of what she was. Marcus didn't need to understand the alien physiology to recognize the pain in her voice. And your father? My father. Zyrathan's expression hardened. My father did nothing. Claimed the attack was justified, that my mother had indeed grown weak. He has taken a new empress, one chosen by the conspirators. Jesus. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. So you ran. I fought. Fire literally flickered around her fingers. I killed 17 of the conspirators before my father's new guard overwhelmed me. They were preparing to tear out my heartfire as well when I escaped. How? For the first time since waking up, Zyrathan almost smiled. Emergency protocols my mother installed in my personal ship. If my life signs dropped below a certain threshold, it would activate and extract me from danger. I was barely conscious when it jumped to hyperspace. And it brought you here? To the ass end of nowhere? Random coordinates far from Drakmori space. Your world was simply convenient. She looked around the workshop, taking in the cluttered chaos with something that might have been amusement. Though I begin to suspect my mother's protocols were more sophisticated than I realized. What do you mean? Zyrathan slid off the workbench, moving with fluid grace despite her injuries. Tell me, Marcus Chen of the humans, what do you know of the Drakmori Empire? Not much. Your people showed up in this part of the galaxy about 50 years ago, claimed a bunch of star systems, and haven't bothered with human space since. Most folks assume you consider us too primitive to be worth conquering. An accurate assessment, Zyrathan said, and Marcus bristled slightly despite himself. Until recently, the Empire's policy toward humanity was benign neglect. You were seen as a curiosity, a species that had achieved interstellar travel despite lacking any apparent psychic abilities or advanced genetic modifications. Gee, thanks. But my mother... Zyrathan moved to the workshop's single small window, looking out at the alien landscape. My mother believed there was more to humanity than the Empire realized. She studied your species extensively, particularly your military history. Our military history? Do you know what every other spacefaring species has in common, Marcus Chen? Marcus shook his head. They all evolved from prey species. Zyrathan turned back to him, and her golden eyes were thoughtful now rather than angry. Herbivores, filter feeders, scavengers, species that learned to build cities and ships and weapons as a response to external threats. They became powerful through necessity, through fear. And humans? Humans are the only known spacefaring species to evolve from persistence predators. You are a species of hunters who learn to use tools. Every other race in the galaxy builds weapons to defend themselves. Humans build weapons to hunt. Marcus thought about that for a moment. Your mother figured this out? She believed that when humanity finally encountered a threat that required your full attention, your response would be unprecedented. Zyrathan paused. She also believed that humans were the only species in the galaxy capable of genuine cross-species bonding. Every other race forms alliances based on mutual benefit or fear. Humans form packs. And you think that's why your ship brought you here? Your mother programmed it to find humans? I think my mother was more far-sighted than any of us realized. Zyrathan moved closer to Marcus. and he was struck again by how alien she was, and how strangely familiar at the same time. I think she knew this day would come, and she wanted to give me allies rather than subjects. Allies for what? Xyrathan's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. To take back my empire, to restore my mother, to make the conspirators pay for what they have done. Marcus looked at this alien princess, standing in his cluttered workshop with blood seeping through makeshift bandages, talking about overthrowing galactic empires with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. The smart thing would be to contact the colonial authorities, let them deal with refugee alien royalty and interstellar politics. The smart thing would be to stay out of what was obviously a civil war involving beings who could casually manipulate matter with their minds. The smart thing would be to walk away. All right, Marcus said. Where do we start? The next morning, Marcus discovered that hosting an alien princess came with unexpected complications. He woke to the smell of burning metal and found Xyrathan standing in his kitchen, staring at the remains of what used to be his coffee maker. I apologize, she said without turning around. I attempted to prepare a morning beverage, but your primitive heating elements could not withstand my touch. Marcus surveyed the damage. The coffee maker was a twisted ruin of melted plastic and metal, and there was a perfect handprint burned into his countertop. Right. Note to self. Invest in heat-resistant everything. You are not angry? Sweetheart, yesterday I was a maintenance engineer whose biggest worry was whether the number 3 atmospheric processor would hold together for another month. Today I'm harboring an alien fugitive who wants to overthrow a galactic empire. A burnt coffee maker doesn't even register. Xyrathan turned to study him, and Marcus was getting used to the way those golden eyes seemed to look right through him. You are remarkably adaptable for a human. You'd be surprised what people can get used to. Marcus opened his emergency ration kit and pulled out 2 meal bars. Here, it's not exactly gourmet, but it's edible. She examined the bar suspiciously. What is it? Compressed nutrients, synthetic proteins, and enough artificial flavoring to make it almost tolerable. Welcome to colonial cuisine. To his surprise, she took a small bite and actually smiled. It tastes like victory rations. Victory rations? Military field rations distributed during successful campaigns. My species associates certain flavors with specific emotional states. She took another bite. This tastes like hope during dark times. Huh. Our food engineers would probably take that as a compliment. Marcus leaned against what was left of his counter. So, about this plan to retake your empire. I'm guessing it's not just going to be the 2 of us. No. Xyrathan finished the ration bar and fixed him with that unsettling stare. But first, I must assess the current political situation. My ship's communication array was damaged during the escape, but if you could help me repair it, I can try. But first, we need to talk about operational security. At her questioning look, Marcus explained. If your people are looking for you, they're going to be monitoring communications. The moment you send a signal strong enough to reach your space, you might as well be setting off a flare. Then how do you suggest we gather intelligence? Marcus was quiet for a moment, running through possibilities. The colony has a Ansible relay station for emergency communications with Earth. It's heavily encrypted and uses quantum entanglement, so it should be undetectable by your technology. If we can tap into the galactic communication networks, you would risk exposing your colony to help me? The Ansible is isolated from colony systems. And besides, Marcus shrugged, if your people are half as powerful as you say they are, the location of one minor human colony isn't exactly state secrets. 3 hours later, Marcus was seriously reconsidering his life choices. The Ansible station was located in a bunker half a kilometer underground, accessible only through maintenance tunnels that hadn't been designed with 7-foot alien princesses in mind. Worse, Xyrathan's natural body temperature meant the narrow passages were rapidly becoming uncomfortably warm. How much further, she asked, and Marcus could hear the strain in her voice. The confined space was obviously affecting her as much as it was him. Almost there. Just around this next corner. The Ansible chamber was a sterile white room dominated by a device that looked like a sculpture made of crystallized mathematics. Marcus had worked on the quantum resonators twice before, once during installation and once 6 months ago when a power surge had nearly fried the entire array. Impressive, Xyrathan said, examining the Ansible with professional interest. Quantum entanglement communication. Crude, but effective. Thanks for the glowing review, Marcus began removing access panels, exposing the device's quantum processing cores. Now, how exactly are we supposed to interface your technology with this? Instead of answering, Xyrathan placed her hand on the Ansible's central core. The air around her shimmered, and Marcus felt that same electric sensation he'd experienced when he first touched her. The Ansible's displays lit up with patterns he'd never seen before. "What did you do?" "Drake-Maury technology is partially psionic in nature," she explained, her hand still glowing where it contacted the machine. "I can interface directly with quantum state devices, though it requires considerable energy." The main display flickered to life, showing what looked like a three-dimensional map of local space. Red dots appeared scattered throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of them, all moving in organized patterns. "Those are Imperial fleet positions," Xyrathan said softly. "More ships than should be in this sector." "What are they doing?" Xyrathan's expression darkened. "Searching. They have mobilized at least 3 full battle fleets to find me." She manipulated the display, zooming in on various formations. "But there is something else. These formations are not search patterns." Marcus studied the display. He'd served in the Navy before his engineering career, and he recognized military positioning when he saw it. Those are staging areas. Someone's getting ready for a major offensive, but against whom? Xyrathan expanded the view, and both of them fell silent. The Imperial fleets were arranged in a rough sphere around a section of space that Marcus recognized with growing dread. Human space. "Oh, shit." "Indeed." Xyrathan's voice was grim. "It appears my escape has provided the conspirators with an excuse to implement a plan they had already prepared. They're going to invade human space to find you. Worse, they are going to use the search for me as justification to annex human territory entirely. Once they have established a military presence in your space, they will simply declare it part of the Empire." Marcus stared at the display, watching the red dots representing enough firepower to sterilize planets moving into position around the worlds he'd grown up knowing. Earth, Mars, the orbital habitats around Jupiter, the mining colonies in the asteroid belt. "How long do we have?" Xyrathan manipulated the display again, pulling up tactical information that scrolled past faster than Marcus could read. "Based on their positioning, perhaps 2 of your weeks before the advance fleets cross into human space. 4 weeks before the main invasion begins." Jesus Christ. Marcus sank into a nearby chair, the magnitude of the situation hitting him. "We have to warn them. The Colonial Authorities' Earth Command. Somebody. And tell them what? That an alien civil war is about to engulf human space? That they face annihilation from an empire they know nothing about?" Xyrathan shook her head. "Your people would not believe it until the first Imperial ships appeared. By then, it would be too late. So what do? We prevent it." Xyrathan's golden eyes blazed with determination. "But not by running or hiding. We take the fight to them." Marcus laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Right. The 2 of us against an empire that spans 3 galaxies. That's not a plan, that's suicide. Not just the 2 of us." Xyrathan called up another display, this one showing what looked like personnel files. "The conspirators may control the throne and the majority of the Imperial fleet, but they do not control everyone. There are still those loyal to my mother scattered throughout the Empire. Military commanders who served under her, administrators who believed in her vision, entire planetary governments who prospered under her policies. You're talking about starting a civil war. I am talking about finishing one that has already begun." Xyrathan's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "The conspirators struck the first blow when they attacked my mother. They expanded the conflict when they decided to annex human space. The only question now is whether we fight back or wait to be destroyed." Marcus studied the tactical display, his engineering mind automatically analyzing the problem. "Even if we could contact these loyalists, how would we coordinate a response? You said yourself that communications would be monitored." "Not all communications." Xyrathan smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it looked genuinely pleased. "There is a reason my mother was so interested in human psychology, Marcus Chen. She recognized something in your species that the rest of the Empire missed. Which is innovation born of desperation. When faced with impossible odds, humans do not surrender. They change the rules of the game entirely. Marcus was beginning to understand where this was heading, and he didn't like it. What exactly are you proposing? Your people have something the Empire has never encountered. Quantum entanglement communication networks. Instantaneous, undetectable, and completely outside Imperial monitoring capabilities. Xyrathan gestured to the Ansible. With this technology, we could coordinate a resistance movement across the entire galaxy, without the conspirators even knowing it exists. The Ansible network only connects human colonies and Earth. We can't use it to reach your people in Imperial space. We cannot, but we can use it to do something far more valuable. Xyrathan's smile turned predatory. We can use it to turn humanity from a target into an ally. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground chamber's temperature. You want to militarize the human colonial network. I want to give your species the tools they need to survive what is coming. Xyrathan pulled up another display, this one showing technical specifications that made Marcus's head spin. Drakmori technology integrated with human innovation, backed by the industrial capacity of your colonial networks. The conspirators expect to face scattered, primitive worlds with minimal defenses. Instead, they will encounter a unified human military force equipped with Imperial-level weapons. And in return? In return, humanity gains access to technologies that will advance your civilization by centuries in a matter of months. Medical technology that can extend human lifespans indefinitely. Environmental systems that can terraform worlds in years instead of decades. Energy sources that could power your entire civilization for millennia. Marcus stared at the displays, his mind racing through the implications. The offer was staggering. Technological advancement beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. But the cost? You're asking us to fight a war for you. I am asking you to fight a war for yourselves. Xyrathan's expression was serious now, all traces of humor gone. The conspirators will not stop with annexing human space, Marcus. They view conquest as the natural order, the strong dominating the weak. If they succeed here, they will continue expanding until the entire galaxy is under their control. And you're different? My mother believed in cooperation over conquest. She saw strength in diversity, wisdom in allowing different species to develop according to their own natures. Xyrathan's voice softened slightly. The empire under her rule was vast, but it was also just. Worlds were protected, not exploited. Species were guided, not enslaved. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, weighing everything he'd heard. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to refuse, to evacuate the colony and hope that somehow, somewhere, someone else would find a solution. But he thought about the tactical display, about those red dots moving inexorably toward human space. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had no idea what was coming for them. He thought about his ex-wife still living in San Francisco, about his sister and her kids on Mars, about every human world that would burn if Xyrathan was right. All right, he said finally. But we do this my way. Human command structures, human tactical doctrine, human rules of engagement. Your people want to join the resistance, they follow our lead. Agreed. And when this is over, when we've won, humanity gets to choose its own path. No forced integration into your empire, no matter how benevolent it claims to be. Also agreed. Marcus stood up and extended his hand. Then welcome to Earth's first interstellar alliance, Your Highness. Xyrathan looked at his outstretched hand curiously. What is this gesture? Handshake. It's how humans seal agreements. She clasped his hand, and again Marcus felt that electric connection, that brief sharing of thoughts and emotions. But this time, instead of visions of destruction, he saw something else. Hope, determination, and underneath it all a fierce protective instinct that reminded him exactly what had started this entire situation. Someone had hurt her mother, and now they were threatening to hurt his people. That Marcus reflected, as he felt the weight of an interstellar war settling on his shoulders, was a very big mistake. "So," he said, releasing her hand and turning back to the Ansible, "where do we start?" "We start by sending a message to your Earth command," Zirathan replied, her fingers already dancing over the quantum processing cores. "And then we begin building an army." The emergency session of Earth's Colonial Defense Council convened 18 hours after Marcus sent his message through the Ansible network. He sat in his workshop watching the holographic display that Zirathan had somehow coaxed from his ancient communication array, as humanity's military leadership struggled to process what they were being told. Admiral Sarah Okafor, Supreme Commander of Earth's Colonial Fleet, was the first to find her voice. "Let me understand this correctly, Mr. Cato. Chen, you're claiming that an alien empire is planning to invade human space, and our only warning comes from a refugee princess who crashed on your backwater mining colony? That's about the size of it, Admiral. And you expect us to take the word of someone we've never heard of about threats from an empire that has ignored us for 50 years? Marcus glanced at Zirathan, who was listening to the conversation with an expression of polite interest. "Maybe you should ask Her Highness yourself." Zirathan moved into the hologram's field of view, and Marcus watched the assembled military leaders react to their first sight of her. Even transmitted through a low-resolution display, her otherworldly presence was unmistakable. "Greetings, leaders of humanity," she said, her musical voice carrying clearly through the connection. "I am Zirathan Vexhai, Crown Princess of the Drakmori Empire. I apologize for the dramatic nature of our first contact, but circumstances require urgency over protocol." General Harrison Martinez, Earth's defense minister, leaned forward in his chair. "Princess, we need proof of these claims. Our long-range sensors show no sign of Imperial fleet movements in our sector. Your sensors would not detect Imperial ships until they were within your solar system," Zirathan replied calmly. "Our stealth technology is approximately 3 centuries ahead of your current capabilities. However, I can provide proof." She gestured, and suddenly the holographic display exploded with information. Star charts, fleet positions, technical specifications, and tactical analyses flowed across the screen faster than the human officials could process. "My God," whispered Colonel Elizabeth Jang, Earth's chief intelligence officer. "Those are real-time tactical displays. How is this possible?" "Quantum entanglement communication allows for instantaneous data transmission," Zirathan explained. "Your Ansible network, while primitive, is compatible with Drakmori quantum state interfaces. I am currently accessing Imperial fleet coordination databases through methods your adversaries believe are impossible." Admiral Okafor studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. "These fleet positions, if accurate, they represent a force capable of sterilizing every world in human space. Conservative estimates suggest the advanced fleets alone possess sufficient firepower to destroy your entire colonial infrastructure within 72 hours, Zirathan confirmed. "The main invasion force could render Earth uninhabitable in less than 6. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus watched as humanity's leaders grappled with the magnitude of the threat facing them. Finally, General Martinez spoke. "Even if we accept these projections as accurate, what can we do? Our combined colonial fleet consists of maybe 200 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels with minimal weaponry. Against this kind of force, you surrender," Zirathan said bluntly. "Or you evolve. Explain. The conspirators expect to face scattered human worlds with primitive defenses. They have allocated forces accordingly, overwhelming but not excessive. They are counting on humanity's lack of advanced technology and coordinated military doctrine." Colonel Jang leaned forward. "You're suggesting we change their calculations. I am suggesting we give humanity the tools to defend itself." Zirathan gestured again, and the display shifted to show technical schematics that made Marcus's engineering background seem woefully inadequate. Drakmori military technology integrated with human industrial capacity and tactical innovation. "What's the catch?" Admiral Okafor asked, her tone suspicious. "The catch is time," Zirathan replied. "We have perhaps 2 weeks to begin implementation, 4 weeks to achieve minimal defensive capability. Your species will need to accomplish technological advancement that typically requires decades in a matter of days. Impossible. For most species, yes. But humanity has something the Empire has never encountered: the ability to adapt and improvise under extreme pressure. Your military history is filled with examples of technological innovation born from desperate necessity. Marcus found himself speaking up. She's not wrong. Human military doctrine has always been about making the best of what you have and inventing what you need as you go. That's a romantic notion, Mr. Serra. Chen, General Martinez said dryly, but retrofitting our entire colonial defense network with alien technology in 4 weeks is beyond romantic optimism. It's fantasy. Perhaps, Sirathan said, but consider the alternative. In 4 weeks, this conversation will be academic, because there will be no human civilization left to defend. The silence stretched out again. Marcus could see the weight of decisions settling on the assembled leaders, the crushing responsibility of making choices that would determine the fate of their entire species. Admiral Okafor was the first to speak. What exactly are you proposing? A 3-phase implementation plan. Sirathan replied immediately, as if she'd been waiting for the question. Phase 1. Immediate upgrades to your most critical defensive installations and primary fleet assets. Basic energy shielding, enhanced weaponry, improved communication systems. These modifications can be implemented within 1 week using existing human manufacturing capabilities. Phase 2. Advanced integration. Quantum state sensors, psionic dampening fields, gravity manipulation systems. These require approximately 2 weeks to implement, but will give your forces the ability to detect and engage Imperial vessels on relatively equal terms. And Phase 3? Zarathan smiled, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Phase 3 is when we stop playing defense and go on the offensive. But that comes later, after we have secured human space. Colonel Zhang was studying the technical readouts with intense concentration. Princess, these specifications, some of this technology appears to violate known physical laws. Your understanding of physical laws is incomplete, Zyrathan replied without condescension. Drake Maury's science is based on manipulation of fundamental forces that your species has not yet discovered. However, the applications I am proposing work within your current understanding of physics. They simply push the boundaries of what you believe possible. Why? The question came from Admiral Okafor, and her tone was sharp. Why are you offering us this? What do you get out of helping humanity? Revenge, Zyrathan said simply. The beings who hurt my mother and usurped my father's throne are the same ones planning to enslave your people. I want them destroyed, and I believe humanity can help me accomplish that goal. And after? When this war is over, what happens to human independence? You remain free to choose your own path. Zyrathan's expression was completely serious. I have no desire to rule over humans, Admiral Okafor. My mother's vision was of an empire based on cooperation, not conquest. If we succeed in deposing the conspirators, humanity will be offered membership in the restored empire as equals, not subjects. And if we refuse that membership, then you refuse it. The restored empire will have no quarrel with an independent humanity, provided you do not become a threat to galactic stability. Marcus could see the military leaders exchanging glances, communicating in the subtle ways that came from years of working together. Finally, Admiral Okafor nodded slowly. We'll need to consult with civilian leadership, but provisionally, we accept your proposal, Princess Zyrathan. But understand this. If you're lying, if this is some elaborate deception, humanity will remember, and we will make you regret it. Understood. And, Admiral, if I am lying about the threat to your people, you will have far more pressing concerns than revenge against one alien princess. The connection ended, leaving Marcus and Zyrathan alone in the suddenly quiet workshop. Marcus slumped in his chair, feeling drained from the tension of the last hour. Well, he said finally, that went better than I expected. Your leaders are pragmatic, Zyrathan observed. They recognize the reality of their situation and are willing to take risks to address it. It is a promising trait. You sound surprised. Many species, when faced with overwhelmingly superior force, choose to surrender immediately or deny the threat entirely. Humans seem inclined to fight regardless of the odds. Marcus thought about that. Maybe we're just too stupid to know when we're beaten. Perhaps. Or perhaps my mother was correct about your species' potential. Zyrathan moved to the workshop's window, looking out at the alien landscape under the alien stars. We will know soon enough. Over the next 72 hours, Marcus got a crash course in what human civilization looked like when it shifted into wartime production. The Ansible network hummed with constant traffic as technical specifications, resource allocations, and tactical updates flowed between every human world. Colonial manufacturing centers that had been producing mining equipment and agricultural machinery were retooled overnight to fabricate weapons components and defensive systems. Zyrathan seemed to be everywhere at once, somehow maintaining simultaneous communication links with dozens of human facilities while providing technical guidance on alien technology integration. Marcus watched her work with something approaching awe. The sheer amount of information she was processing and coordinating should have been impossible for a single individual. "How are you doing this?" he asked during one brief break in the constant stream of activity. "Drakmori neural architecture is designed for parallel processing," she explained, not looking up from the quantum interface she was configuring. "We evolved as pack hunters who needed to coordinate complex group activities across large territories. Individual Drakmori can maintain conscious awareness of multiple simultaneous thought processes. That explains the multitasking. But the technical knowledge, you seem to understand human manufacturing processes better than most human engineers. I spent 3 years studying your species' industrial capabilities at my mother's request. She believed that human adaptability and resourcefulness could compensate for technological limitations given proper guidance." Marcus shook his head. "Your mother really was planning this, wasn't she? Even before the coup, she was preparing for the possibility of human Drakmori cooperation." "My mother was many things, but naive was not one of them. She understood that the Imperial faction advocating for aggressive expansion would eventually move against her. When they did, she wanted to ensure that alternatives existed. Alternatives to what? To galactic conquest being the only path forward." Zyrathan finally looked up from her work, and Marcus was struck by the sadness in her golden eyes. "The Empire spans 3 galaxies, Marcus. We have conquered or absorbed thousands of species, brought order to billions of worlds. But my mother believed that our greatest strength could become our greatest weakness." "How so?" "Conquest creates subjects, not citizens. Fear creates obedience, not loyalty. An empire built on force alone is always vulnerable to those with greater force." She gestured to the technical displays surrounding them. "But an empire built on cooperation, on mutual benefit and shared growth, that becomes something far more durable. And you think humanity can help build that kind of empire?" "I think humanity represents something the galaxy has never seen before, a species that forms genuine partnerships across biological and cultural barriers. If we can prove that such cooperation is not only possible but superior to conquest," she trailed off, then smiled. "But first we must survive the next 3 weeks. As if summoned by her words, Marcus's communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Okafor's image appeared in the holographic display, and Marcus could see the strain of the last few days in her face. "Princess, we have a problem. Long-range sensors have detected unidentified vessels at the edge of the Kepler system. They're not responding to hails, and their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Zyrathan was at the display instantly, her hands already interfacing with the quantum processing cores. "Show me." The display shifted to show sensor readings from the system's edge. 3 ships hung in the void, their configurations sleek and predatory. Even through the grainy sensor data, Marcus could see they were built for war. "Imperial scout ships," Zyrathan said quietly. "They have found me." "How is that possible?" Admiral Okafor demanded. "You said our location was secure." It was, but Zyrathan's expression darkened as she analyzed the sensor data. "These are not military vessels. The energy signatures are wrong. Her hands moved faster over the interface, pulling up tactical information. These ships belong to the Shadowhunt Division. What's the Shadowhunt Division? Assassins, Zyrathan said simply. Elite operatives trained to hunt and kill members of the Imperial family. The conspirators are not taking any chances. Marcus felt his blood run cold. How long before they reach the colony? At their current velocity? Perhaps 6 hours. Can we evacuate? Where? Zyrathan's smile was grim. They have already detected my energy signature. Even if you could move every colonist off-world in 6 hours, they would simply follow. No, evacuation is not an option. Admiral Okafor's voice crackled through the communication link. Princess, our nearest patrol vessels are 18 hours away. We can't get help to you in time. Then we make our stand here, Marcus said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his own voice. This is as good a place as any to find out if human Drakmori cooperation actually works. Zyrathan stared at him. Marcus, these are not ordinary soldiers. Shadowhunt operatives are trained from birth to kill beings like me. They are faster, stronger, and better armed than anything your colonial defense force has encountered. Maybe, but they're not facing just your colonial defense force. Marcus turned to the communication display. Admiral, how many of those Phase 1 upgrades are online? About 40% of our primary installations. Basic energy shielding and enhanced weaponry are operational on most of our frontier defense platforms. What about the new detection arrays? Can we track Imperial ships in real time? Limited capability, but yes. Marcus looked at Zyrathan, then back at the display. Then let's give these assassins a proper human welcome. The next 5 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Colony Station Kepler, by 442b, had never been designed as a military installation. It was a mining outpost with minimal defensive capabilities and a civilian population that included families, children, and elderly colonists who had never seen combat. Marcus found himself coordinating the evacuation of non-essential personnel to the underground mining tunnels while simultaneously helping Zyrathan integrate Drakmori defensive technology with the colony's existing systems. It was like trying to perform surgery while riding a roller coaster. The quantum resonance field is fluctuating, Zyrathan called out from her position at the main power distribution center. Your electrical grid cannot handle the energy requirements. Then we improvise. Marcus was knee-deep in a maintenance conduit, rerouting power cables to bypass the overloaded systems. Sarah, can you redirect power from the non-essential sectors? Sarah Kim, the colony's chief administrator, was hunched over a control panel that had been modified so extensively it barely resembled its original configuration. Already done. We're running life support on minimum, and I've shut down everything except essential communications and defensive systems. What about the mining equipment? Marcus asked. Those plasma cutters pack enough energy to carve through asteroids. You want to turn mining equipment into weapons? I want to turn everything into weapons. Marcus emerged from the conduit, wiping sweat and grease from his face. Exerathen can Drakmori technology interface with industrial plasma systems? In theory, yes. But the power requirements, she paused, her golden eyes focusing on something invisible to the humans around her. Actually, that might work. If we can create a resonance cascade through the mining network, we could establish a defensive grid that covers the entire colony. Explain it like I'm 5 years old. Your plasma mining system creates superheated energy streams to cut through rock. If I can synchronize those systems with Drakmori force field technology, we can project defensive barriers at multiple points around the colony. Sarah looked skeptical. The mining grid was never designed for that kind of coordinated operation. We'd need precise timing across dozens of separate installations, which is why we're not going to control it manually. Marcus was already moving toward the colony's central computer core. We're going to let the quantum systems handle the coordination. Marcus, Zyrathan said carefully, that level of integration between human and Drakmori technology has never been attempted. The feedback could destroy both systems. Yeah, well, if we don't try it, we're all dead anyway.
Marcus began pulling access panels from the main computer core.
Besides, you said humans were good at breaking the rules. The Imperial scout ships dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule, appearing at the edge of the Kepler system like 3 dark angels of death. Through the colony's enhanced sensors, now boosted by Drakmori quantum detection arrays, they could watch the ship's approach with terrifying grace. "Scanning now," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ranking military officer among the colonists. His background was in logistics rather than combat, but he was adapting to the situation with the pragmatic efficiency that Marcus was beginning to recognize as a particularly human trait. "What do we see?" 3 ships, roughly Corvette class. Energy signatures consistent with Princess Xyrathan's specifications for Imperial military vessels. They're not attempting to hide their approach, because they do not believe they need to, Xyrathan said grimly. She was standing at the center of what had once been the colony's main conference room, now transformed into a command center bristling with hybrid human Drakmori technology. Shadowhunt operatives are trained to be superior to any opposition they encounter. "Arrogant," Marcus observed. "Realistic," Xyrathan corrected. "In 3,000 years of Imperial history, no Shadowhunt mission has ever failed. Then I guess it's time to break their winning streak." Marcus activated the colony-wide communication system. "All stations, this is command. Imperial ships are 4 hours out. All defensive systems are now active. Remember, we don't have to win this fight. We just have to survive it long enough for reinforcements to arrive." The next 3 hours were spent in tense preparation. The colony's 800 residents had been evacuated to the deepest mining tunnels, protected by emergency force fields and enough supplies to last a week. The surface installations were staffed by volunteers, mostly maintenance workers and security personnel who had some relevant experience, plus a handful of former military personnel like Torres. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of commanding an improvised defense force made up of mining engineers, atmospheric technicians, and a single alien princess who could manipulate matter with her thoughts. "Contact," Torres announced as the 3 Imperial ships entered the system's inner perimeter. "They're hailing us." "Put them through." The main display flickered to life, showing a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. The being on the screen was humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways. Too tall, too thin, with features that seemed carved from shadow and starlight. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. "I am Vorthak Sekhai, Shadowhunt Prime of the 4th Division. We seek the traitor Xyrathan Vexhai. Surrender her to us, and your deaths will be quick." "Charming," Marcus muttered. "Standard diplomatic approach in your empire?" "This is Marcus Chen, Administrator of Colony Station Kepler 442b, he said aloud. "We don't recognize Imperial authority in human space, and we don't surrender our guests to uninvited assassins." The Shadowhunt operative's expression didn't change, but something in its posture suggested amusement. "Human, you do not comprehend what you face. We are Shadowhunt. We end dynasties and topple empires. Your primitive world cannot protect the traitor." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but we're going to try." The communication ended abruptly, and immediately the colony's sensors lit up with new contacts. The 3 Imperial ships had launched smaller craft, sleek, predatory vessels that moved through space with impossible grace. "Assault shuttles," Xyrathan identified. "They will attempt to land directly at the colony and capture me alive. Standard Shadowhunt doctrine calls for minimal collateral damage. How minimal? They will not destroy the colony unless absolutely necessary. They prefer precise elimination of targets." "Good," Marcus said grimly. "That gives us an advantage." "How do you figure?" "Because we're not going to be precise. We're going to be human." Marcus activated the defensive grid, watching as plasma mining systems across the colony synchronized with Drakmori force field generators. "All stations weapons-free. Remember, these are the same beings planning to enslave every human world. Make them regret coming here." The first assault shuttle hit the colony's defensive perimeter and immediately discovered that human Drakmori hybrid technology was full of unpleasant surprises. Instead of the expected energy barriers, it encountered a plasma field that interfaced directly with space-time manipulation, a combination that created a defensive grid unlike anything in Imperial tactical databases. The shuttle's pilot tried to adapt, adjusting course to avoid the plasma streams, only to find that the defensive grid was adaptive, Mining systems that had been designed to track ore deposits through shifting asteroid fields proved remarkably effective at targeting fast-moving spacecraft. First shuttle down, Torres reported. But the other two are adapting. They're using evasive patterns I've never seen before. Shadow hunt pilots are trained from childhood, Xyrathan explained. They can perform maneuvers that would kill pilots from other species. Then we stop trying to outfly them and start using human tactics. Marcus switched to the mining network control frequency. All crews initiate the cave-in protocol. The what now? Torres asked. Something we learned from asteroid mining, Marcus explained as explosions began blooming across the colony's perimeter. If you can't catch what you're chasing, change the environment so it has to come to you. The mining charges detonated in carefully coordinated sequence, collapsing tunnel networks and shifting the landscape around the colony. Suddenly, the assault shuttles found themselves flying through a maze of floating debris, unstable gravitational fields and plasma clouds venting from ruptured mining conduits. One shuttle clipped a chunk of floating rock and spun out of control, crashing into a maintenance building in a ball of fire. The third shuttle managed to land, but not where its pilot had intended. Instead of the main landing pad, it came down hard in the middle of the colony's refuse processing center. 2 down, 1 landed, Torres reported. But sensors are showing multiple contacts emerging from the crashed shuttle. Through the command center's reinforced windows, Marcus could see figures moving through the smoke and debris with fluid, predatory grace. They wore armor that seemed to bend light around it, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Shadow hunt operatives, Xyrathan confirmed. Perhaps a dozen, armed with psionic amplification gear and quantum disruptor weapons. Translation for those of us who don't speak technobabble: they can move through solid matter, manipulate gravity, and their weapons can disintegrate molecular bonds. Xyrathan's expression was grim. In open combat, they are virtually unstoppable. Then we don't fight them in open combat. Marcus activated the colony's internal defense systems, a network of automated security devices, emergency containment fields, and industrial safety mechanisms that had never been designed for warfare. We fight them like humans. The Shadow Hunt operatives moved through the colony with lethal efficiency, following sensor readings that led them inexorably toward the command center. They encountered no opposition during their advance. The colonists had apparently fled, leaving only empty buildings and abandoned equipment. It was a trap, of course, but it was a uniquely human trap. The first operative triggered a maintenance alarm when it passed through what appeared to be an empty storage facility. The alarm activated emergency containment procedures, sealing blast doors and flooding the area with industrial-grade fire suppression foam. The operative could phase through the doors, but the foam interfered with its sensory equipment. While it was momentarily disoriented, mining charges concealed in the walls detonated, bringing down several tons of rubble. The operative survived. Shadow hunt training included resistance to physical trauma, but it was buried under debris that interfered with its psionic abilities. The second operative made it 3 blocks further before stepping on what appeared to be a routine maintenance hatch. The hatch was actually an improvised gravity mine, a mining tool repurposed to create a localized gravitational anomaly. The operative found itself pinned to the ground by forces equivalent to 15 times normal gravity. The remaining operatives adapted quickly as their training demanded. They began moving in formation, using their sensors to detect the improvised traps, communicating through psionic links that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. But they were thinking like Imperial soldiers, accustomed to facing enemies that followed established tactical doctrine. They weren't prepared for an opponent that treated the entire colony as a weapon. The attack came from everywhere at once. Atmosphere processing systems vented superheated steam into corridors where operatives were advancing. Power distribution networks overloaded in sequence, creating electromagnetic pulses that interfered with Imperial equipment. Emergency lighting systems strobed in patterns designed to trigger disorientation in humanoid nervous systems. Most effective of all were the improvised weapons systems that Marcus had distributed throughout the colony. Mining tools, construction equipment, and maintenance robots all reprogrammed to recognize Shadow Hunt energy signatures as hostile targets. The operatives found themselves fighting a running battle against an entire environment that had turned against them. Every doorway was a potential trap. Every corridor could become a kill zone. and the humans seem to have an unlimited capacity for improvising new and unexpected threats. This is insane, one operative reported through its psionic link. The humans are using their entire settlement as a weapon system. Continue the advance, Vorthak Sekhai ordered from his command ship. The traitor is in the central command facility. Eliminate all resistance. But as the surviving operatives closed in on the command center, they discovered that the humans weren't finished with their surprises. The final approach led through the colony's main power distribution center, a facility that had been heavily modified with Drakmori technology. Zyrathan stood waiting for them in the center of the facility, surrounded by quantum energy conduits that pulsed with barely contained power. Her skin glowed with inner fire, and her golden eyes blazed like twin stars. "Hello, cousins," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the metal walls resonate. "I have been expecting you." The Shadow Hunt operatives moved to surround her, their weapons charging with lethal intent. They were the elite of the Empire, trained to kill dragons and topple thrones. Against a single injured princess, they should have been unstoppable. They weren't prepared for what happened next. Marcus stepped out from behind a power conduit, carrying what looked like a modified plasma cutter. "Yeah, well, you weren't expecting me." He pulled the trigger. The modified plasma cutter discharged with a sound like reality tearing. The beam that emerged wasn't the focused cutting tool Marcus had started with. It was something new, a fusion of human engineering and Drakmori quantum manipulation that created a weapon unlike anything in Imperial tactical databases. The nearest Shadow Hunt operative tried to phase shift, becoming partially incorporeal to avoid the attack. Instead, the quantum-enhanced plasma beam followed it through dimensional space, striking the operative in whatever reality it existed in. The being materialized with a scream that sounded like breaking glass. "Impossible," another operative hissed, bringing its own weapon to bear. "Humans cannot wield quantum state weaponry. Humans can't do a lot of things," Marcus replied, diving behind a power conduit as disruptor beams seared the air where he'd been standing. "Turns out we're really bad at knowing our limitations." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the recorded history of the Drakmori Empire. On one side, the most elite soldiers the galaxy had ever produced, beings trained from birth to be perfect weapons, equipped with technology that made them nearly invulnerable. On the other side, one injured alien princess and a human maintenance engineer with a talent for improvisation. It should have been over in seconds. Instead, it became a lesson in why underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. Zyrathen fought like her mother had taught her, with precision, grace, and the controlled fury of a dragon defending her territory. Fire erupted from her hands in patterns that turned the power distribution center into a maze of superheated plasma. She moved through the facility as if she owned it, using every piece of equipment as both weapon and shield. But it was Marcus who turned the battle. He fought like a human, with creativity, desperation, and a complete willingness to break every rule of engagement ever written. When the operatives tried to coordinate their attack, he triggered electromagnetic pulses that interfered with their psionic communication. When they attempted to use their superior speed and agility, he activated emergency containment fields that changed the geometry of the battlefield. When they brought their advanced weapons to bear, he responded with improvised devices that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Most importantly, he refused to fight the battle on their terms. "Vorthak," one operative reported as it took cover behind a melted support beam. "The humans are not following established tactical doctrine. They appear to be making up their strategy as they proceed." "Then adapt," the Shadow Hunt Prime ordered. "You are the elite of the Empire. Overcome and improvise." But the operatives had been trained for perfection, not adaptation. They knew exactly how to kill any enemy they had ever encountered. But they had never encountered an enemy that treated warfare as an engineering problem to be solved, rather than a contest to be won. Marcus treated each operative like a particularly complex piece of malfunctioning equipment. When conventional attacks failed, he tried unconventional ones. When those failed, he invented new ones on the spot. "Zyrathen, can you overload the quantum conduits?" "Yes, but the feedback would destroy the entire facility. That's the idea. On my mark, channel everything you've got into the main power grid." "Marcus, that will kill us as well." "Maybe." Or maybe it'll do something else entirely. Marcus triggered another emergency system, flooding the area with industrial coolant that immediately turned to steam when it contacted Xyrathan's superheated aura. Trust me. She looked at him through the chaos of battle. Energy beams cutting through the air around them, pieces of equipment exploding from weapon impacts, the screams of wounded Shadowhunt operatives echoing off metal walls, and nodded. Very well. On your mark. Marcus waited until the surviving operatives had regrouped for their final assault, then triggered every emergency system in the facility simultaneously. Mark! Xyrathan placed her hands on the main quantum conduit and released every bit of power she possessed. The energy that flowed through the system was beyond anything it had been designed to handle. The raw fury of a dragon princess channeled through human industrial equipment and amplified by Drakmori technology. The result defied physics, engineering, and common sense. Instead of exploding, the facility became a weapon. Every piece of equipment, every power conduit, every safety system activated at once, creating a resonance cascade that turned the entire complex into a quantum state disruptor field. The Shadowhunt operatives found themselves caught in a zone where the laws of physics had become optional, and reality itself was subject to revision. One operative tried to phase shift and found itself stuck halfway between dimensions. Another attempted to activate its gravity manipulation gear and inadvertently created a localized black hole that consumed its own weapon. A third operative tried to retreat and discovered that causality was running backward in a 3-meter radius around its position. In the end, it was over in seconds. The surviving Shadowhunt operatives found themselves disarmed, disoriented, and completely out of their depth. Marcus and Xyrathan stood in the center of the chaos, surrounded by the impossible aftermath of human ingenuity meeting dragonfire. Well, Marcus said, surveying the wreckage of the power distribution center. That worked better than I expected. Define worked, Xyrathan replied dryly. We have converted the facility into a localized space-time anomaly. The long-term effects are completely unpredictable. Yeah, but the short-term effects got us through the battle. Marcus activated his communicator. Torres, report. Command, this is Torres. All hostiles are down or contained. No human casualties. What the hell happened over there? Our sensors are showing readings that don't make any sense. We improvised, Marcus replied. What's the status of the Imperial command ship? Still in orbit, but it's not moving. Sensors suggest it's scanning the anomaly we created. Marcus looked at Xyrathan. Think they'll try again? Not immediately. Shadowhunt doctrine calls for tactical withdrawal when encountering unknown threats. She paused, listening to something beyond human hearing. But they will report what happened here to their superiors. And then? Then the conspirators will realize that humanity is not the primitive species they believed you to be. Xyrathan's expression was thoughtful. That will change their plans considerably. The communication array chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Okafor. Her image appeared in the holographic display, and Marcus could see the amazement in her expression. Chen, Princess, we've been monitoring the situation through long-range sensors. What you've accomplished there, it's going to change everything. How so? We've been intercepting Imperial communications for the last hour. The Shadowhunt Prime has reported that human defensive capabilities exceed all previous estimates. More importantly, he's confirmed that human Drakmori technological integration is not only possible, but tactically superior to either technology base alone. Xyrathan leaned forward. What has been the Imperial response? Confusion, panic, and a lot of very heated arguments among the fleet commanders. It appears that the invasion plans were based on the assumption that humanity would be easily conquered. Now they're not sure how to proceed. Marcus felt a grim smile crossing his face. Good. Confusion is what humans do best. There's more, Admiral Okafor continued. We've been contacted by several Imperial fleet commanders who claim to be loyal to the true Empress. They want to arrange a meeting. Where? They've requested that Princess Xyrathan choose neutral ground for negotiations, somewhere that demonstrates human Drakmori cooperation while remaining secure from further Shadowhunt attacks. Marcus looked around the ruined facility, where pieces of equipment were still defying gravity, and several areas showed signs of spontaneous temporal distortion. I vote we host the meeting right here. Here? Xyrathan looked at him with amusement. In the middle of a space-time anomaly? Think about it. Any Imperial commander who wants to negotiate with us has to come to a place where human and Drakmori technology have merged into something completely new. It sends a message about what's possible when our species work together. It also sends a message about what happens to people who attack human colonies, Admiral Okafor added approvingly. How soon can you be ready for visitors? Marcus surveyed the chaos around them, mentally cataloging what would need to be repaired, replaced, or simply accepted as a permanent alteration to local reality. Give us 48 hours, he said finally. By then, we should have this place ready to properly impress some Imperial fleet commanders. 2 days later, Marcus stood in what had once been the colony's main conference room, watching as the most powerful beings in the galaxy tried not to stare at the ongoing violations of physics happening in the background. The space-time anomaly had stabilized somewhat, but the facility still exhibited properties that made even Drakmori technology look primitive by comparison. The Imperial commanders who had come to negotiate were an impressive sight, beings that radiated power and authority, accompanied by guards whose presence made Marcus's teeth ache. But they were also visibly nervous, their confidence shaken by the evidence of what humans could accomplish when properly motivated. "Distinguished commanders," Xyrathan began, her voice carrying the formal tones of Imperial protocol, "I thank you for responding to our invitation. As you can see, the cooperation between humanity and the true Empire offers possibilities that benefit all parties." Fleet Commander Zeth Kara, a being that looked like it was carved from living crystal, spoke first. "Princess, what we see here defies explanation. Human technology should not be capable of interfacing with Drakmori quantum systems. Human technology is more adaptable than your intelligence reports indicated," Marcus replied. "We have a saying on Earth, necessity is the mother of invention. When someone threatens our people, we get very inventive very quickly. The Shadowhunt attack on this facility resulted in capabilities that exceed anything in Imperial databases," another commander observed. "How did you achieve such integration?" "By refusing to accept that it was impossible," Xyrathan answered. "Humans do not recognize limitations in the same way other species do. When told that something cannot be done, they frequently interpret it as a challenge rather than a fact." Marcus nodded. "The princess is being polite. What she means is that we're too stubborn to know when to quit." The assembled commanders exchanged glances, communicating through subtle body language that spoke of years of military cooperation. Finally, Fleet Commander Zeth Kara addressed them directly. "Princess Xyrathan, the loyal fleets are prepared to support your claim to the throne, but we must ask, what role would humanity play in a restored empire?" "The same role they have chosen for themselves," Xyrathan replied without hesitation. "Partners, not subjects. The empire my mother envisioned was one of cooperation and mutual benefit, not conquest and subjugation. And if some Imperial worlds resist this partnership?" Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Commander, 3 days ago, a dozen of the Empire's most elite assassins attacked this colony. Today, you're negotiating with us as equals. I think the Empire's resistance to human partnership is going to be less of a problem than you expect." The negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from military coordination to technological exchange to post-war political arrangements. But Marcus knew the real decision had been made the moment the Imperial commanders saw the impossible fusion of human and Drakmori technology that surrounded them. When the meeting finally ended, Marcus found himself alone with Xyrathan in the ruins of the power distribution center. The space-time anomaly hummed around them, a reminder of what they had accomplished together. "So," he said, "think it's going to work? This alliance of ours?" "I think," Xyrathan replied, her golden eyes reflecting the strange energies that danced through the air around them, "that the galaxy is about to discover why my mother was so interested in humanity. You are a species that turns impossible situations into opportunities. And you're a princess who was smart enough to crash land in the right place." Marcus looked around at the ongoing violations of physics that had become as familiar as furniture. "Though I have to ask, what happens after? When we've won this war and restored your mother and put you on the throne, what then?" Xyrathan was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Then we find out if an empire built on partnership is stronger than one built on conquest. We discover if cooperation really can triumph over domination. We learn if the galaxy is ready for something it has never seen before. And if it's not ready, then we make it ready. Zyrathan's smile was sharp as starlight and twice as dangerous. After all, you humans have taught me something valuable about dealing with impossible situations. Which is sometimes the best.